The word was carved deep, as if the blade had been held with both hands. Amina saw it before she sat down for letters, etched with such force that splinters frayed at the edges like torn flesh. It wasn't just a slur. It was a sentence, a verdict, a reminder of everything they wanted her to believe she was. It marked the top of her desk, in the corner where her elbow usually rested during math. She had learned to fold her arms there, to draw invisible lines between herself and the room. This morning, there was no line, just that word, that wound. Around her, no one said anything. Not the girls who passed notes, not the boys who chewed pins and spat jokes between lessons. The teacher, Mr. Horbenko, too tired for confrontation, cleared his throat and began the lesson like the wood hadn't bled. Chalk dust settled over old numbers. The radiator coughed but didn't warm. Amina didn't speak. She never did. But her eyes stayed fixed on the word. It pulsed under her skin, syllables echoing in her ribs. When the bell rang, the classroom drained like a cut vein, fast, jittery. She remained in her chair, hands folded. The sunlight that broke through the dusty windows caught on the scraper Mr. Horbenko fetched from the supply closet. He knelt, wordlessly, and began to shave the wood. Each stroke lifted a piece of the insult, thin curls of grain falling like ashes. The sound was gentle, almost reverent. He never looked at her, just scraped, and when he finished, he wiped the desk with his sleeve and left the room. She stared at the spot. The word was gone, but the pressure of it remained, like a bruise you couldn't see. The walk home took 31 minutes. She counted them. 31 minutes across a village that pretended not to watch her but always did. Behind half-closed curtains, from porches and windows, she passed the church, the war memorial, the old barn painted with nationalist slogans. Mud sucked at her boots, clinging like hands. Her house sat at the edge of the fields, weathered and lopsided, with one shutter always loose and a roof that creaked like an old throat. A fence sagged under the weight of dead vines. Chickens scratched near the gate, clucking disapproval at everything that moved. Inside, Mikola sat in his chair, as usual. His chair was more throne than seat, pressed against the tiled stove he no longer lit. His coat hung on the wall like another ghost. He was peeling a potato with slow, steady motions, the blade clicking each time it caught on the hard skin. "You're late," he said, not looking up. "There was a meeting," she lied. He grunted. Whether in belief or disinterest, she couldn't tell. Silence was his first language. Regret, maybe his second. She washed her hands, poured water into the kettle. The pipes groaned, resistant. The kitchen still smelled of dust and boiled onions. In her room, she opened the wooden box beneath her bed. Her sketchbook lay inside, pages curling slightly at the edges from humidity. She flipped past the drawings, scenes she had never shown anyone. Her mother's hands, imagined from memory. A man's face she had invented 100 times. Her own eyes, drawn over and over, darker each time. She tore one page out, then another, and another. She fed them to the stove like offerings. The fire took its time. Charcoal lines curled, faces disappeared, and the pages hissed into heat. She sat in front of the flames, watching them devour what little of herself she had dared to create. The warmth didn't reach her. Nothing ever did. The van didn't belong. It was too clean. The kind of clean that attracted stares, not because of beauty, but because of disbelief. As if something bright and intact had stumbled into a place that forgot color existed. It pulled into the schoolyard just before noon, kicking up clouds of pale dust that clung to the crumbling brick like old breath. Children stared through the classroom windows, faces pressed to glass, breath fogging the cold paints. Amina watched too, but from a distance, always from a distance. The woman who stepped out was everything the village was not. Her scarf was red, as if stitched from autumn itself, and her coat, long, patched, smeared with old paint, fluttered in the wind like a banner. Her boots were worn to softness but bright with pigment in every seam. She had short hair tucked under a beret and skin the color of dried wheat. She stood with her back straight, her presence sharp against the sagging school behind her. That afternoon, the principal made a dry announcement. "An artist," he said, with a voice made for reciting rules. Larisa Melnichuk. Cultural Mural Initiative. She will be here for 2 weeks. He said it like he didn't believe it would last. Amina didn't expect much either. Outsiders came sometimes. Inspectors, preachers, one time a health worker who lasted 2 days. They always left. The village wore them down. But Larissa didn't look worn. She looked like she had come to tear something open. By the end of the week, she had chosen the east wall of the school, the one with the most peeling plaster and the least foot traffic. It faced the wheat fields and caught the morning light. She said it was perfect. When Amina passed her sketching that wall, she kept her eyes low, hoping to slip by unnoticed. You, Larissa said, pointing a charcoal-smudged finger without looking up. With the quiet walk. Amina froze. Yes, you. Don't pretend I didn't see you. You walk like someone trying to vanish. That makes you interesting. Amina approached slowly, wary. Larissa looked her over once, head to foot, then back again. Her eyes didn't flicker. They landed and stayed. I want to draw you, she said. Your face carries contradiction. It says, leave me alone, but your spine says, dare me. That's rare. Amina's mouth felt dry. Why me? Because you don't want to be seen, Larissa said, scribbling a shape in her sketchbook. And art isn't about showing who wants to be seen. It's about who needs to be. The next morning, the village began to buzz. Not loudly. Not yet. Just whispers, the kind that crept into corners and under doors. Larissa had chosen her subject. And not just any subject. The girl. That girl. The one who didn't belong, even if she'd never left. In class, some students looked at her longer than usual. Not kindly, not cruelly. Just examining. As if trying to locate the flaw they hadn't seen before. By lunch, someone had spit on the side of the school wall. Not where the mural would be, closer to the entrance. Closer to her. That evening, at home, Mikola stirred his soup without looking up. She wants to paint you? Yes. Don't let her. Amina didn't respond. He glanced at her then, his eyes tired, hollowed. She'll leave. You won't. Don't let her turn you into something they can destroy more easily. She didn't choose me to be destroyed. She chose you because she can leave when it's done. Amina wanted to argue, but the words stayed behind her teeth. Instead, she opened her sketchbook in the dark of her room and drew a field on fire. The flames weren't red, just black lines, over and over, filling the sky. For 5 days, Amina stood still while Larissa sketched. The cold air gnawed at her fingertips, even through gloves. Her knees stiffened by the second hour each day, and her back ached from holding the same posture. But she didn't move. You can blink, Larissa would say, half smiling. I'm not carving you into marble. But Amina rarely did. She wasn't posing for beauty. She was bracing for impact. Larissa's drawings weren't soft. They didn't try to flatter or flatter. They searched. Each brushstroke seemed to dig under the skin. Her outlines were sharp, eyes larger than life, lips slightly parted, as if about to speak but unsure if they were allowed. At first, Amina didn't recognize herself. Then she did. Not from mirrors, but from memory. That same look, that tension between silence and scream, she'd seen it in old photos of her mother. In the photo that had been hidden for years. That was when she began to draw again. At night. Quietly. In secret. She didn't draw herself. She drew the mural. Repeated it from memory, then changed it. Added her mother's face beside hers. Drew a man's shadow behind them, undefined, reaching but never touching. Amina layered the figures like echoes, testing what it meant to be a story no one told. By the end of the week, the first colors appeared on the wall. Red, ochre, charcoal blue. Her classmates noticed. Whispers grew bolder. She really thinks she deserves a place here? She's trying to make herself a saint. She looks like a warning, not a celebration. Amina kept her eyes low. But in the hallway, a boy shoved past her and muttered, "It won't last. They'll cover it." Like always. At home, Mikola had begun smoking again. Not openly. Just once a day, behind the barn. The smell lingered on his coat. "She's putting you in danger," he said. "No," Amina said. "You are." He looked at her then. Not angry. Just deeply, terribly tired. Later, Searching through an old chest for blank paper, she found the photograph again, curled at the edges, pale with time. Her mother, old, young and unsmiling, stood beside a man Amina had never met but had drawn 1,000 times. His hand hovered at her waist, never quite touching. His face was tilted down, like he didn't want the camera to see him. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was a single name, Kalechi. Amina stared at it until the words stopped looking like language and became shape. When she brought it to Mikola, he winced. "Where did you find that?" "In the chest." "You shouldn't have." "Why not?" "He's gone." "But he was real." "Yes," Mikola said quietly. "And real things can be hated more easily than ghosts." He loved her. She believed he did. She didn't name me after him. She didn't want you to carry him like a curse. Amina pressed the photo to her chest. "She didn't curse me." "You did." Mikola's face twisted pain or shame. "I was trying to protect her." "From what?" "From being seen." The wall disappeared overnight. Amina arrived early that morning, boots cutting tracks in wet frost, her breath curling like mist around her face. She came expecting to see color, sun-warmed ochre, forest green, the rich umber that Larissa had mixed specially for her skin. She had watched those colors bloom on the brick over days, shaping a version of herself she had never dared to believe could exist in public. But now, the wall was white. Not white like light or snow. White like erasure. Thick, cheap paint slathered from top to bottom in streaks that ran like tears. It hadn't dried properly. Beneath the hasty brushwork, shadows still lived. A nose here. The ghost of an eye. A blurred edge of her jaw. It wasn't vandalism. It was obliteration. Larissa arrived minutes later. She stopped beside Amina, staring at the wall for a long time before speaking. "They didn't paint over it to hide it," she said. "They painted over it to silence it." Amina's throat felt too small. She reached out and touched the surface. Her fingers came away wet. By noon, the news spread. The school issued a statement. The mural was halted due to unforeseen community concerns. The administration has decided to maintain a neutral visual environment. The students read it aloud during lunch, mocking every word. Neutral. As if neutrality ever included her. That afternoon, Larissa began packing. Amina helped her carry brushes and paint tins to the van. Neither spoke until the last box was shut. "You still have the letter I gave you?" Larissa asked. Amina nodded. "You could leave," Larissa said. "I can find a place for you in Odessa. Somewhere with warmth. With mirrors that don't lie." "I can't leave him." Larissa's jaw tightened. "He's not your jailer. He's my only family. That doesn't mean he's your future." Amina looked down at her hands, paint-stained, ink-blotted, cold. "If I leave now, it's like they won." Larissa studied her for a moment. "You think staying makes you strong?" "No. I think leaving would make me forget." The next day, Amina returned to the back of the school with her sketch pad. She didn't ask permission. She chose a wall no one looked at, cracked plaster, half-shadowed by a crumbling gutter. She began to draw in charcoal. Her lines were sure. Her hand didn't shake. She drew her mother first. Not how she looked in the photo, but how Amina remembered her. Arms outstretched, shoulders square, a face that defied softening. Then came the man. Kalechi. She drew him with hands open, not touching anything, as not cast down but forward, as if searching for her. And finally, herself. Not centered, not whole, but rising between them like a seed that refused to rot. That night, Mikola stood by the stove, lighting a cigarette he didn't pretend to hide. "She left letters," he said. "Your mother." After he was gone, Amina looked up. "I burned them. All but one." He reached into his coat and held out a folded paper. His hand shook. She took it. Inside was a sketch a girl standing in a field. Her face incomplete. Her hands blurred. "She was drawing you," Mikola said. "No," Amina whispered. "She was drawing who I might become." Spring came like a betrayal. It arrived not with warmth, but with rot. The earth, long frozen and rigid, began to weep. Paths turned to rivers of brown slush. Fences leaned further. Roofs sagged under the weight of damp that soaked from inside out. The school closed for 3 days, not from celebration, but from surrender. The boiler gave out. The power flickered. No one wanted to walk through mud for lessons no one remembered. Even the teachers stayed home. Amina didn't mind. She spent those days in the field behind the house, where the frost still clung to the roots of last year's sunflowers. The stalks stood like skeletons, windblown and hollow, their heads bowed as if ashamed to have once reached toward light. She stood among them, her coat buttoned to the throat, sketchpad under one arm. Her fingers numbed quickly, but she drew anyway, furious, fast lines. She drew herself with her mother's hands. She drew her mother with Kalechi's eyes. She drew a family that had never stood in the same room, standing together in her mind. In the evenings, Mikola said nothing about the new stains on her cuffs or the wet boots by the stove. He watched her draw with an expression that hovered between guilt and awe. When school reopened, the village was still wet with thaw. Roads sucked at tires. Children arrived late, half mud, half child. In the corridor, Terrace blocked her way. "You think you're something now?" he asked. "Because someone painted your face?" She didn't answer. He stepped closer. "Your mother was a whore. That makes you." She walked past him. Didn't look back. But that night, she pressed the charcoal so hard into the paper it tore straight through. She didn't stop. The next day, a package arrived. No sender. Just her name, barely legible on the torn label. Inside, paint tubes, real brushes, a roll of canvas, and a note. "Still watching. Still believing. Don't go quiet. L." She held the note between her fingers for a long time before folding it into her pocket. That night, she dreamed of her mother again. Ol stood in the sunflower field, not broken, not afraid. She wore a white dress Amina had never seen in real life. She smiled. Then she opened her mouth. No sound came. When Amina woke, the dream left her with one word echoing in her mind, not said aloud, just understood. Stay. In the kitchen, Mikola stood at the window, staring at the flooded fields. "I dreamed of her," Amina said. "She came to you?" "Yes." "What did she say?" "Nothing." He nodded slowly, like he understood. That was her way. "She didn't leave me. She was taken." Mikola's face tightened. "I know." Amina turned toward the door. "I'm going to the school. It's Saturday. I'm not going for class." She left before he could reply. Outside, the sky hung low, thick with the color of wet paper. But she walked through it without hesitation, paint in her bag, canvas under her arm, a storm in her chest. The word was carved deep, as if the blade had been held with both hands. Amina saw it before she sat down for letters, etched with such force that splinters frayed at the edges like torn flesh. It wasn't just a slur. It was a sentence, a verdict, a reminder of everything they wanted her to believe she was. It marked the top of her desk, in the corner where her elbow usually rested during math. She had learned to fold her arms there, to draw invisible lines between herself and the room. This morning, there was no line. Just that word, that wound. Around her, no one said anything. Not the girls who passed notes, not the boys who chewed pins and spat jokes between lessons. The teacher, Mr. Horbenko, too tired for confrontation, cleared his throat and began the lesson like the wood hadn't bled. Chalk dust settled over old numbers. The radiator coughed but didn't warm. Amina didn't speak. She never did. But her eyes stayed fixed on the word. It pulsed under her skin, syllables echoing in her ribs. When the bell rang, the classroom drained like a cut vein, fast, jittery. She remained in her chair, hands folded. The sunlight that broke through the dusty windows caught on the scraper Mr. Horbenko fetched from the supply closet. He knelt, wordlessly, and began to shave the wood. Each stroke lifted a piece of the insult, thin curls of grain falling like ashes. The sound was gentle, almost reverent. He never looked at her, just scraped, and when he finished, he wiped the desk with his sleeve and left the room. She stared at the spot. The word was gone, but the pressure of it remained, like a bruise you couldn't see. The walk home took 31 minutes. She counted them. 31 minutes across a village that pretended not to watch her but always did. Behind half-closed curtains, from porches and windows, she passed the church, the war memorial, The old barn painted with nationalist slogans. Mud sucked at her boots, clinging like hands. Her house sat at the edge of the fields, weathered and lopsided, with one shutter always loose and a roof that creaked like an old throat. A fence sagged under the weight of dead vines. Chickens scratched near the gate, clucking disapproval at everything that moved. Inside, Mikola sat in his chair, as usual. His chair was more throne than seat, pressed against the tiled stove he no longer lit. His coat hung on the wall like another ghost. He was peeling a potato with slow, steady motions, the blade clicking each time it caught on the hard skin. "You're late," he said, not looking up. "There was a meeting," she lied. He grunted. Whether in belief or disinterest, she couldn't tell. Silence was his first language. Regret, maybe his second. She washed her hands, poured water into the kettle. The pipes groaned, resistant. The kitchen still smelled of dust and boiled onions. In her room, she opened the wooden box beneath her bed. Her sketchbook lay inside, pages curling slightly at the edges from humidity. She flipped past the drawings, scenes she had never shown anyone. Her mother's hands, imagined from memory. A man's face she had invented 100 times. Her own eyes, drawn over and over, darker each time. She tore one page out, then another, and another. She fed them to the stove like offerings. The fire took its time. Charcoal lines curled, faces disappeared, and the pages hissed into heat. She sat in front of the flames, watching them devour what little of herself she had dared to create. The warmth didn't reach her. Nothing ever did. The computer lab groaned under its own weight. Dust blanketed the monitors. 2 were dark forever. 1 flickered with the screen frozen in 2008. But the last, slow and stubborn, whirred to life after Amina tapped the side. She plugged in the flash drive. On it, a scan of her drawing. Her mother's face, whole this time. Her father's eyes, lifted and open. Her own face centered now, defiant, drawn in bold charcoal, lips unsealed. She uploaded it to Truthwall, the art activism site Larissa had once shown her. There was no caption, no explanation, just a title. "I'm still here." Then she closed the browser, unplugged the flash drive, and left. By the next morning, it was everywhere. First, a repost on a regional youth art blog. Then, a Ukrainian diaspora newsletter. Then, Berlin, Prague, Toronto. Someone tagged her anonymously on social media. Comments flooded in. "Who is she? This broke me. I've never seen Ukraine drawn like this before." A Kiev magazine called the image a confrontation between silence and survival. By midweek, journalists appeared. A car from Odessa parked outside the school. A woman with a press badge waited by the gate. Someone handed out flyers calling for an exhibition. Someone else took photos of the wall, of the burned plaster, of her. The principal released a statement, carefully worded. "Hello. The school supports creative expression within respectful boundaries." Amina didn't go near the cameras. Instead, she went to the old wall, the back of the school, the place where she'd started again. It wasn't just her wall anymore. Other students had begun to sketch on it. Faces, hands, trees. One girl drew a woman wrapped in a headscarf holding a sign that read, "I have always been here." Amina helped a younger boy outline his grandfather's profile. She brought extra brushes. She mixed paint in yogurt cups. She taught without words. At home, Mikola moved slower these days, but his eyes were different, less fog, more fire. One night, he brought her a book, African Poets in Translation. She kept this, he said, placing it in her hands, even when the rest was burned. Inside, a bookmark held a poem with a line underlined twice. "We do not inherit silence. We break it." That night, she wrote her first letter to Larissa. It didn't end with the fire. It began there. She attached a photo of the new wall. Not finished, but alive. Larissa responded within hours. "It's not your portrait anymore. It's your voice." The next day, a girl in class, soft-spoken, always at the back, slid a paper toward her during lunch. On it, a note. "Can I draw with you?" Amina turned the paper over, drew a sunflower, passed it back. No words needed. It began with no speech, no ceremony. just a brush dipped in water. Amina stood in front of the wall with the others, children, teens, even two of the younger teachers. No adults led. No one gave permission. They came because something in the silence had cracked, and light was getting in. The fire hadn't destroyed the wall, it had revealed it. Beneath the char, the bricks still held. Stronger, even, for the burning. Together, they scrubbed. Ash and soot fell like old snow. Beneath it, bits of the mural survived, outlines half-saved, colors peeking through. Where it didn't survive, they painted over, not in white, but in light. Yellow, ochre, sky blue. Amina didn't draw herself again. She painted a tree instead, tall, rooted deep into the wall's base. Its trunk bent slightly, like it had survived too many winters. But its branches spread wide, cradling the sky. Within its limbs were names, not in ink, but in shape. Her mother, her father, her own name folded into the grain. She added leaves. The other children added their own, some painted fingers instead, or handprints. The wall became not a mural, but a record. A forest. On the final afternoon, the school called for an assembly. No podium, just benches and sky. The principal stood with his hands clasped behind his back, saying nothing. Behind him, the mural glowed under the sun. Cameras clicked. The Odessa paper sent a photographer. A representative from the Ministry of Culture took notes. But Amina ignored them. She stood near the wall with a brush in her pocket and paint under her nails. Mikola arrived late, breathless. He wore his old coat. He didn't speak, just stood beside her, watching. Someone asked Amina if she wanted to say something. She looked at the wall, then at the children, then shook her head. Instead, she walked to the mural and painted one final line, small, near the bottom corner. A shape, not a word. A flame, simple, bare, and beneath it, in charcoal script, still burning. That night, the sky over the village was unusually clear. Stars blinked in the silence. Amina stood at the edge of the field behind her house, sketchbook open, the wind soft in her ears. In the dark, the burned wall stood behind her, not as ruin, but as monument. And as she lifted her pencil to paper, the silence didn't choke. It listened.